Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. As you can tell, joined by a bit of a special guest, Indy, as the girls have popped out for an hour or so, and it's just us lads in the house. So, of course, that brings with it any potential chaos that can come, as he's just jumped down onto the floor, and he could bark at any point, and the ice cream van could come by at any point because it is a very sunny day right now. So yeah, chaos may ensue, and to be honest, chaos pretty much seems to follow Tottenham Hotspur around right now. Yesterday, it was as much happening around and off the pitch as it was on it for a change. It was just mad, honestly. Press box views, they differ. Sometimes you get fantastic ones. Sometimes you get ones that are shoved up in the gods. Look, hey, it's a free seat. Not complaining, just telling you there's very different angles and views we get. Yesterday's one at the Tottenham Hotspur was absolutely perfect for everything that kind of spilled onto the touchline, the dugout, everything that happened. We could pretty much see everything going on. And it was weird, we'd spoken about this before. The narrative for this game was meant to be, Roberto De Zerbi coming to Tottenham in front of 62,000 people, showing the fans, the Tottenham fans mainly, exactly what good football should look like at the stadium. Still happened to a degree, and as I'll touch on a bit later, they were really denied by some very iffy refereeing, some awful VAR work from Stockley Park, which obviously is now brought at the PGMOL, got to get that right, admitting that they made a mistake with Højbjerg's kind of tackle catching the foot of Mitoma. So that aside, they probably would have come away with a win. But instead, I kind of felt like De Zerbi wrote a different bit of a script for himself than the one we all expected. I don't really think it was a particularly good one. If Spurs had any doubts about De Zerbi and maybe the fiery side of his character, other little aspects of the way he conducts himself, I guess, this was not the greatest audition on the touchline, although, like I say, football was very good. So, if you're not aware exactly what happened, we kind of noticed it when we got in our seats. There was a pre-match handshake, as the managers always do. So we watched Christian Stellini go over, attempt to shake De Zerbi's hand, and it was very, very awkward. It was not quite, but it looked like it was going to potentially become the whole Conte-Tuchel handshake, where De Zerbi held Stellini's hand and he just started jabbing at him like that. Not touching him, but poking his finger in his direction, just going like, rah, 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 rah. It was a proper rant ensuing. And Stellini's face was just like, what have I done kind of thing. It was really weird. So, after digging around and asking around and speaking to people around it, it appears to be, I think it was all in Italian, but obviously people have got the gist afterwards as people gave their sides of the story. The suggestion appears to be that De Zerbi had been angered, upset, whatever you want to call it, by reading Italian versions of reports from Stellini's pre-match press conference at Hotspur Way on Thursday, which we were at. I'm trying to remember if there were any Italian journalists present. I don't think there were. David, who is normally, I think he works for the Gazzetta dello Sport, he is normally there, and he's an excellent journalist, but he wasn't there, I don't think, on Thursday. I'm pretty sure that he was back in Italy and returned for the match. Very nice guy. But that's a whole other thing. But what happened is the Gazzetta dello Sport must have taken... certainly one version I saw on their website was a video of the press conference, but it had the headline above it, which when you translate it, said, Stellini, De Zerbi exploited all of Potter's work at Brighton. Which, pretty much, I guess, if you're De Zerbi and you're seeing that headline, you're thinking, what? Why is he having a pop at me? But the problem with that headline is it didn't really reflect in any way, shape or form a press conference where Stellini probably, I don't think it could have been any more complimentary about De Zerbi We all walked away from it, and this is absolutely honest. This is not revising it with hindsight or anything. Honest truth. As soon as the press conference finished, various journalists and us, we all said to each other, "Wow, he pretty much that was a better interview for Zerbi than Zerbi could have done himself if he wanted the job." Because he really, Stellini, raved about it, glowing reports about the way he coaches and everything. And weirdly, the whole Potter thing's a strange one because he was only mentioned kind of at two moments in the press conference. In the broadcast part, which is the bit you see videos of, this is what he said of De Zerbi's Brighton. He said, "They are well prepared. When you start to press them, they find a way to overcome your pressure. They're well positioned. They plan a match in the right way. They have many solutions and adapt themselves when you change something because they came from a good job that Potter did with them for a long time. Also, I think De Zerbi finds a good solution to play with his style because that team came with Potter and they know themselves very well. This is a great opportunity because when players play for a long time with each other, it's easier and they plan well for the match." And then he was asked in the later section of the press conference, which is called the written section, the embargoed section, whichever you want to call it, which is, it goes out at 10:30 at night for the newspapers the next day. It's a separate section. He was asked, because I don't know if you remember this, but I probably would have said it in a previous video. I definitely would have written about it. When Stellini first arrived in England, he studied Potter very closely because he was fascinated by the different systems he used and everything, and he wanted to learn from him, so he studied him quite closely. So with that knowledge, one of the questions put to him was, what have you noticed the differences between Potter and what he was doing at Brighton and what De Zerbi's done at Brighton? So he said in reply to that, "I think De Zerbi is not fluid tactically like Potter, but De Zerbi is more of a manager consistent in the way he wants to hurt the opponent. He is more focused with the ball and what they can do with the ball and being aggressive when they lose the ball. Potter was more fluid in the change of system, but the players are smart to do it. You have to create intelligent players to do it. De Zerbi has improved a lot. He has a great personality like a manager, and he arrived here in a new country and quickly he put his sign on his team. That is not easy for everyone, and De Zerbi showed also in England in the Premier League he's a great manager." So if you could take anything from what's just come, or what I just read, that states that Stellini was being negative or derogatory to De Zerbi in any way, fair play to you, because unless it's hidden between the lines, I absolutely cannot see it. If anything, what I took from that is he's saying, yeah, Potter's did a good job, but De Zerbi has built upon those foundations and made them better. I mean, the stats are there for everyone to see what he's improved in all of the categories from Potter. And to be honest, that's something that De Zerbi himself has said in the past. He said that, he was very fortunate that there was a nice foundation there, and then he was able to bring his different style of tactics and his different football and improve on it. And that's a great thing. It's very helpful when you're not having to absolutely overhaul a mess of a club. Ring any bells? So I don't get that. I don't get that whatsoever. And what I find really odd that Premier League managers, players, whatever, they're always very quick to say that, oh, my quotes were taken out of context. I didn't really mean that. They've taken that. They haven't used the rest of it. Yet, in this instance, it appears, if this is all entirely accurate, as for the reason, that De Zerbi has seen headlines or seen something the way it was written in Italy, but not actually watched the press conference or even looked at the transcript. I know one journalist that writes in every word of the press conference. So it was there. The material was there to have a proper sense of what actually happened before launching in really clumsily into essentially accusing that other coach of saying something that he really didn't. It was really odd. And what it did was that handshake and everything around it just sparked this whole confrontational atmosphere throughout the whole game. And actually, we were saying in the press box, it actually lent itself to creating an edge in the match. You could see that kind of in the match it was spilling over into quite kind of not nasty tackles, but tough tackles. Like I say, it had that edge to it, which is probably a good thing. It's maybe not exactly what we expected from this game at all. And I'd actually say it probably helped fire up Spurs a bit more than it did Brighton. Although, I still think Brighton probably deserved at least a point, if not more, from the game. And De Zerbi, he just could not let it go. You could just see, like I say, we had a great view of both dugouts, and I could see Zerbi. I could have done a Zerbi watch, even more so than the game. He was constantly so far out of his technical area. He was almost on the edge of the Spurs one. And you could just see him just talking away, kept turning towards the Spurs dugout and saying stuff. Don't know what he was saying, but I'm sure it wasn't complimentary stuff. Just honestly, everything was aimed at them. And then when Lewis Dunk scored the equaliser, Zerbi seemed to celebrate in the dugout's direction. And Ryan Mason, how do I put this politely? He told, it appeared to be telling Zerbi where he could go. Yeah, and there was more to come. When Danny Welbeck's goal was ruled out for VAR because of handball deflection off of McAllister, which was a bit tough in itself. It just increased. That crackling kind of tension between the two benches kind of ratcheted up even more. And obviously there was lots of things that, let's be honest, that Brighton could have been aggrieved about. I felt there was a lovely move for Matoma to score in the first half, and it's ruled out for a handball, which I thought was iffy. I always thought, unless they've changed the rule again, I thought it was meant to be the t-shirt line. It had to be below the sleeve for it to be a handball. I thought it was kind of more there, but they made the decision after a very, very, very long check of VAR. Which I thought it wasn't a handball, but hey, that's just me. I don't matter in these things. And then the McAllister handball was that was harsh. I could maybe see slightly more why that was given. Then they had, like I said, the Matoma. That was after the subsequent incident. Matoma, the challenge from Højbjerg on him, which wasn't even really looked at. So yeah, there was lots of stuff that I think Brighton could have been aggrieved by. But I would say De Zerbi was already, before any of that, overly hyped up and just antagonistic and just deciding that he was going to really kind of try to rile Spurs up throughout. And eventually it worked, certainly for the rest of the coaching staff. Because, whatever was being said, just suddenly were like, whoa! It was one of those where anyone watching the game, which was continuing, was missing the fact that if they looked down, both dugouts went ruff into each other. It's like, when you get those battle scenes in like Game of Thrones, Braveheart, whatever, when suddenly you see them all going, and you hear all the clashes of swords and axes and shields and everything coming together. Obviously, they didn't have those. I hope they didn't. That would have been really dodgy. But just suddenly they went all together. But not everyone. That was a weird thing. Stellini and Mason stood absolutely on the other side of the technical area, dealing with players and saying stuff and shouting stuff to their players. And they kind of essentially turned around and were like, what the hell has happened behind us? I was trying to think the Spurs coaches that I could certainly see. Stefano Bruno, the fitness coach, he's quite a diminutive guy, but he was bouncing around, kind of really like, ooh, and like jumping around, wagging his finger at everyone. Who else was there? Marco Savarani, the goalkeeping coach. He was right in amongst the thick of it. Fitness coach Costantino Corrati as well. He was in there. But like I say, Stellini and Mason were right over the other side. And it was only eventually Mason started to come over to try and do a bit of peacemaking. And there were a few players trying. I guess this is the thing when it doesn't look great, when the players are having to play the mediators. So you had Richarlison and Davinson Sanchez, who were unused subs, came across from the bench to try and stop it. Perisic came off the pitch to try and stop it as well. It wasn't a good look. And then what happened was Stuart Atwell just kind of watched it all, looked at it all, and then brandished the red card for first De Zerbi and then Stellini. Stellini's face was absolutely just... There's some great images of him looking absolutely shocked. There's images of him just staring at the camera. I don't know how they managed to get that, but he's just looking at the cameras. It looks... Someone made a great point at the press box. It was like, the Neil Warnock one where he goes like that. And it was exactly looked like he was about to do that, but he didn't, obviously. So the official at the time, obviously, we're all like, why in the world has he sent off Christian Stellini, a man who was 20 foot away from everything? So what it turns out is the rule is that the red card officially was given to both managers for failing to control their staff. If you look at it like that, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what Stellini could have done, bearing in mind he was 20 foot away, turned the other direction, trying to talk to his players, as a manager really should be focused on doing. I don't know, is he meant to lie across the kind of technical area to stop them coming out of the bench, like you shall not pass kind of thing? Very, very weird. But I looked it up, and Law 12 in the FA rulebook states that where an offence among team officials is committed and the offender cannot be identified, the senior team coach present in the technical area will receive the sanction. So I looked at the list of possible offences for red cards. There's a lot within that list that I definitely could see happening there in front of us between the technical areas. There's ones like aggressive behaviour, there's going into the other team's technical area, there's loads of various ones that, boxes ticked, but I just find it a bit ridiculous that Stellini's got caught up in that. I get the idea of, you're in charge of them, but I really don't see what you can do in that scenario to stop it if you're focused on pitch matters, because the game was going, and that's kind of exactly what it was. But I think in a way it's going to end up being a means to an end for the FA, in terms of you deal with it, you red carded 2 managers, head coaches, and then afterwards you review and thoroughly search through the footage and you see what actually happened. So personally, I'd be shocked if his red card means a suspension, because with managers it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get suspended. Often when they get a red card, they're going to fine. There'll be other things taken into account, and I'm absolutely sure that they will look at the footage, see that he's nowhere near what's happening, or was actually just doing his job at the time. I'd be stunned if he doesn't just get whatever the basic fine is for not controlling your staff. I mean, don't forget Antonio Conte with that handshake I referenced earlier with Thomas Tuchel, the handshake, more like Strictly Come Dancing. Conte didn't get any kind of suspension for that whatsoever, and you could argue that he was probably more involved in a scenario and help playing his part, I guess, a little part in what happened, way less than Tuchel, obviously. Whereas Stellini, honestly, he quite literally is an innocent bystander. But there's others who I think maybe will be less fortunate, shall I say, in avoiding any sanctions that may be to come from the FA. Certainly Savarani, I don't know how to repeat his name. Savarani 3 times, one more for luck. From what I could see, and it looked to be confirmed when I watched, there was a video I saw circulating of the incident afterwards, and I saw it at the time. Savarani, there's like one of the Brighton members of staff kind of pushes him away and then turns his back as if to go like, I don't know, I'm a wall between you warring factions. And it looked like Savarani pushes the guy's head forward, who then turns around, and it's not great. And then Stefano Bruno starts like really jumping up and down, hey! It's as if he's worried that he's going to turn and get him. But yes, I think Savarani is probably, when they review that footage, could find himself in a bit of problems. And maybe Bruno as well, and Karate for their getting overexcited about it all. It was essentially lots of Italian people getting very emotional. And, you know, this may well be the thing you see in Serie A more often than not. I don't know. But it was a sight to behold. It really was. It was crazy, to be honest. But I'm intrigued to see what happens with Zerbi, because, like I said earlier, this whole thing about his character, his numbers are not good when it comes to disciplinary this season. That's his 2nd red of the season. I think he's had 4 yellow cards as well. He's previously got a suspension for accumulating those 4 yellow cards. He's a fiery character. He's very intense in his press conference afterwards. He's quite awkward in terms of he will say what he wants to say. If the next person tries to ask a question and he has decided there was more he wanted to say to the previous one, he will suddenly restart talking midway through the question. There were times when he would just answer with a couple of words and stop and just stare. He's he's an intense character. I do wonder, obviously I was a big fan of him as a potential Spurs candidate, and still am because of the football. I think the football is incredible. It's beautiful to watch. But yeah, you do start to wonder whether after the Conte era and the kind of firecracker of a manager he was kind of thing, and the incendiary type he could be, would you want to bring in another person who looks like he's going to be very similar? And I had heard that he was a bit of a character. And yeah, his press conference, some of the things, what was he saying? He was not backing down. He said, I'm used to always to respecting everyone inside of the pitch and outside of the pitch. I don't like it when the people don't respect me. But there are normal situations in football, and stop. I don't know why he's just saying and stop, but he did. I always respect everyone, especially the coaches, and I can answer for me, not for him. And that was kind of pushed on. He said, do you mean that Stellini doesn't respect you? And he said, yes. It was a personal situation, and I told him what was my opinion, my idea, not the words, not nothing, only my opinion. And he was asked about his disciplinary record, and he said, yes, I'm sorry, but my career was the first time so many red cards. If you analyse my career, you can't find so many red cards. I think we played 2 games with me in the stand, and we won both games. I think there isn't a problem. I don't know. Maybe I change league and I have to change habits. No, I don't know. It was a strange press conference. It was. He is very much, I think, as a journalist, it'd be quite fascinating because you don't know how he's going to react to anything, which way he's going to go with it. He has a translator partly. He speaks very good English, but he has a translator for sometimes bits of questions that he might not be able to grasp, or words that he wants to say that he doesn't quite know the English equivalent of, which is similar to Poch and Jesus Perez. But yeah, it was a strange one. And then Stellini, Stellini was first. Stellini came in first, and he just looked so nonplussed by it all. I was starting the presser. I asked a couple at the start, and I asked one towards the end about Sonny. And we both looked at each other before I was about to ask a question, and I kind of started laughing because I was just like, how do we get to the bottom of all this? And he actually, I don't know if the video's out there, but he starts to have a little chuckle as well just before I'm about to start, because it's like, where do we begin all of this mess, and where do we start the delving into this? And so I asked him, just the first question was like, we could see it all started from that handshake at the start. What happened? What did he say to you? And is the old kind of first rule of Fight Club is no one talks about Fight Club pretty much. He said, I can only say that what happened on the pitch stays on the pitch. It's like stays in Vegas thing, isn't it? Sometimes it seems something bad, but it is not. I want to let everyone understand that this is my second game as a head coach for Tottenham, and I want to give respect to all the managers in the Premier League. When I speak about a manager, I speak every time like I am a person that has to learn from all the managers who work in the Premier League. Managers that work in the past, managers that work now. I want to learn every day. I try to do my best, and I want to give respect to everyone, so I don't speak about anything that happens on the pitch. So it's kind of hinting there about the fact that, speaking about a manager as if it was, like we said, like it seems to be what it was about. But it was kind of asked, whether Zerbi was unhappy with something he'd said. And Stellini said, I don't know, and I don't want to change my idea. I want to be respectful to everyone and continue to do my job the best. And I asked him, I kind of followed up saying, you looked really shocked by the actual red card, but kind of do you understand now that it was about this this idea that you're responsible for all of your coaching staff? And he said, he kind of nodded, and he said, I consider the red card because also if I try and stay calm and be focused on the game, I have to manage the bench and to keep all of them calm. But in that moment, for me, I was focused on the players. I wanted to speak to all the players, and I lost my focus on the bench. This is the rule. I have to respect the rule. But I think also, if you look at what happened, I was polite and calm. And he was. He absolutely was. It's kind of what he is. He's not really... It gets angry occasionally at stuff, but on the whole, he's actually quite calm and collected. He's very kind of the antithesis, I think I said last week, of both Conte and Paratici. He's very... He's not your stereotypical kind of like passionate, loud Italian. He's completely opposite. He's very thoughtful, calm and collected. And yeah, I would be absolutely stunned. You can never rule it out with the crazy way football authorities work, but I would be stunned if he's not in the dugout against Bournemouth. Absolutely stunned. Cue a video of me next week going, oh, Stellini wasn't in the dugout against Bournemouth. Yeah, so 25 minutes there talking about the absolute madness that was Zerbi's audition at Spurs and all of the madness around that moment. But yeah, honestly, it needed to be unpacked because it's just a crazy, crazy thing. It's a bit like when all the stuff happened with Conte and Tuchel throughout the game at Stamford Bridge early in the season. As journalists, we're almost like, we just want the game to end. I want to get in the press conference. I want to find out what's happened, kind of thing. Yeah, thankfully Spurs grabbed a very unconvincing but very important win. So it actually it meant that you were writing about crazy stuff, but with a happy ending, as it were. So Stellini departed, went down the tunnel, had a bit of you could see it on our monitors, he was having a bit of a to and fro with Zerbi as they went down, and they were both being pushed into the different dressing rooms. So I think for everyone at home, or in the stadium, probably, or most of the stadium, they would have looked at that, seen Stellini left the pitch, seeing Ryan Mason on the touchline and felt, oh, Mace has taken over. Oh, look at this, Danjuma's come on. And, within a minute, we've got the player we wanted. Within a minute, he's come on. Spurs have scored a goal. Mason masterclass. The truth is that actually kind of wasn't what happened. Although it would have looked like that from everywhere else, barring the press box and those fans who sit around the press box, because we saw that suddenly, much to our shock, Christian Stellini popped up in the press box. He went up there and he sat next to Spurs tactical analysts. And what they do during the game, they often sit up just kind of off to the side of the press. It's a very big press box, so there's quite a lot of room. And they sit up there, and throughout a match, you can see them poring over the data, watching stuff, and you've got earpieces, and they talk down to the bench and give them little kind of updates on maybe the shape, formation, things that certain players aren't doing well, and stuff like that. It's a constant stream of dialogue. So Stellini, what happened was he went up. He didn't come up and help me with my match report or anything. He came up and he sat alongside those analysts. And essentially just constantly was telling them what he wanted to happen, and they were transmitting that and talking to the dugout and the bench and the coaches down there. So their job obviously slightly changed from dissecting the data to passing on exactly what Stellini was telling them to say. So with the subs and everything, that would have been made by Stellini, and that would have been his idea, because obviously he still had a very similar view, just about 10 rows up, maybe 20 rows up, maybe slightly more. But still a very good view of everything going. So yeah, he was. I don't know quite how that works in terms of being sent off. I don't know how allowed you are to do that, whether you'll end up getting in a bit of trouble for that. I don't know. And this isn't me getting him in trouble. I've got a quote. He said afterwards, he said, I went upstairs to watch the game, and if I could give them suggestions, I had people that could maybe transfer my idea down to them. But Ryan Mason, the coaching staff, did a great job. They finished well the game, and we have also energy to finish the game in the right way. So Stellini was very much still managing the team, just from a few rows up. We got the Danjuma substitution. Way! I did a tweet saying the classic. This is not a drill. Arnaud Danjuma is about to come on for Spurs, because it was such a whoa moment, especially when we saw Richarlison unexpectedly on the substitutes bench. Another Stellini injury news update in the pre-match press conference, where he said no one was going to be back available, and Richarlison suddenly rocks up. Although, to be fair, from what I understand, I think Richarlison did make himself available. I think there was a lot of... I think we all saw Richarlison there and assumed, Danjuma's back down the pecking order. But from the sounds of it, I think the Spurs coaches and everyone was still a little bit, are you really fit, kind of thing. And it was almost like, okay, well, you're telling us that... Because I guess when it's a muscle injury, you've also got to rely quite a lot on the player telling you whether there's any pain and issues. And obviously, against Southampton, injured it in the warm-up, as he did his hamstring against for Brazil at the World Cup, and he continued or wanted to play on. And this is what got him this whole tag from Conte about being selfish about stuff, didn't it, Richarlison, which obviously did not go down very well. Well, actually, no, the selfish thing was more about complaining about his situation, wasn't it? But yeah, I don't think that went down well, the Southampton decision of clearly being injured but saying he could play on, and then within 4 minutes they had to make a sub. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of uncertainty around it, and if he was going to be brought in, I think Stellini said it to the TV broadcast interview just before the kickoff, said about essentially he's there for maybe a couple of minutes at the most if we need him, and as it was not used, and instead Danjuma came on. 78th minute, so almost 20 minutes before Stellini left the pitch and went up to the stand. So it wasn't like, Stellini's gone, yeah, let's change this bad boy and make it the most exciting attacking team ever. That wasn't what happened. 20 minutes later, Stellini would have said from the stands, right, time for that change. And Danjuma replaced Kulusevski. Kulusevski is another strange game where there was lots of moments where he gives the impression that he was the most dynamic player on the pitch, runs, charging past players, but the final ball, the quality in the final third at the moment is not good from Kulusevski. He had one shot that I remember after cutting inside that flew wide of the post, but ultimately, yeah, didn't contribute too much. And so he was replaced by Danjuma. He went to the left-hand side, and Sonny moved across to the right of the front three. And it was really interesting. Just literally a minute later, Danjuma was making a big impact on the move for the goal without even touching the ball. It was so. If you didn't see the whole move, Christian Romero intercepted a ball. I think Mitoma was trying to play a little flick. Ball went loose. Romero got in there, intercepted it, played it very quickly to Sonny. Sonny turned and played a beautiful pass through the legs of, I think it was Adam Webster, and into the path of Højbjerg. Højbjerg races into the box, and at the same time, Danjuma's made a really good run across the left, to the left-hand side of the box. And when you look at it, two Brighton players have gone with Højbjerg, and Danjuma has dragged another two defenders with him, and that leaves, beautifully, a load of space for a certain Harry Kane. And fair to Højbjerg, Højbjerg got flack for Højbjerg had a really poor first half. He was giving the ball away at will. But the second half, I actually thought he played really well. But it's one of those where it's Højbjerg. Some people don't particularly rate him or like him, so they will only really remember the first half. The second half, he was actually really good. He was, for me, was one of those players that stepped up after all of the mess on the sidelines as a bit of a leader. And the move, you watch it, you look at him, he takes a little look just before he makes the final surge into the box. He knows exactly that Kane's coming in space, and he plays the perfect ball to Kane, obviously hits the shot, deflects off the hip of Joel Veltman and into the net. But yeah, it was really interesting that Danjuma's run and the quality of his movement opened up so much space for Spurs. Just in that one moment, Spurs shed that predictability that's kind of dogged them all season. Brighton didn't know what to do. Suddenly there was all different kind of movements. Sonny being on the right as well, I think was a massive change as well, because it suddenly gave the people on that side of the pitch something very different to contend with. And he just played, I thought Sonny played very well yesterday. Really, really well. Especially after a game against Everton where he didn't contribute too much. He was right back on it. We'll talk about Sonny in a minute. If you're wondering why we haven't spoken about Sonny in that amazing goal, don't worry. He's getting his own little section. And yeah, the ball, like I say, through the legs of Webster to Højbjerg was pitch perfect, absolutely pinpoint. It was so good. So yeah, just suddenly, Sonny on the right, well, we haven't seen him too much this season. You know, in the past, we've seen him kind of what do you call it? Interspersing, switching, whatever you want to call it, crisscrossing with whoever's on the right. Whereas I think with Kulusevski, he's very much a guy that sticks to the right. Whereas I quite like it when we see Son popping up all over the place, because he's got this beautifully, well-trained ability to use his left and right foot. So he's dangerous coming in from either flank. And it just changed things up. And Danjuma posted on Instagram afterwards, if you didn't see it. I think he did it on Twitter as well. Amazing to feel the support from the fans for our win today. Let's keep pushing. And he put this little blue box emoji that just had the word free in it. And he was free. For 19 minutes, he was free again just to play football. Do you know what? That was his home debut. Almost 2.5 months after he signed for the club, he finally made his home debut, which is just ridiculous. 2.5 months where he's been completely fit and able and ready to play. I do wonder whether his mind ever kind of casts back to that moment where he's sitting at Finch Farm. Kind of everything's about to be completed on his Everton deal. And suddenly it gets the call like, oh yeah, Spurs want you. And he then races down the motorway, heads to Spurs and signs for them. Like I get it. I get that, you got Champions League football, team in the top 4 at that point. The lure of it would be very strong. But he must look back and think, at Everton, I would have played so many minutes. I think the quality he could probably brought to Everton, they might be even in a far better position now than they currently are. Obviously, they've had issues with strikers and attackers, and Calvert-Lewin's been injured again. Instead, he wasn't to know, of course, that very much Fabio Paratici and the recruitment team at Spurs drove his signing, and clearly Conte didn't particularly want him. He even publicly came out again and said, "Here's a public signing, here's a club signing, and he doesn't actually fit my formation," which it's not great. It really isn't great. And one side, that's a failing of Paratici and the recruitment team for not getting a player who fits Conte's system. But then I guess the other side is it also highlights the rigidity of Conte's system and the absence of, I guess, a plan B, that he can only play in this very set system with very set players. He can't look at players that play in slightly different roles. It also, I think to a degree, I mentioned this in my piece on the game, my talking points this morning, that it also points to this hierarchy within the squad that I don't think does anyone any favours. And Conte spoke about, Stellini's spoken about it, where the fringe players, the young players, whatever you want to say, they know that there's this hierarchy and there are these important players in front of them. I don't like that. I never like it. Whenever I hear it, I'm like, oh, that's really not great. This idea that the important players, the star names, regardless of their form, are likely to get picked. And we've seen it this season. Only injuries seem to give other players a chance. And that's not a good way to run a club or a team. Not great. But this was good for Danjuma. It really was. Even if he did little of note with the ball, I wouldn't say that particularly with the ball. There was like one moment where I thought, he's going to take it into his stride and run in, but he didn't. But it was just his movement, his intent, his hunger. You could see how hungry he was, and the chaos that his movement was causing to the opposition. It just might have shown Stellini that your plan A doesn't always have to be very, very similar to plan A. Plan B can be quite different. And if you believe that Danjuma is more of a support striker or naturally more of a wide player, and yet, yes, the Conte system, which obviously Stellini, mainly injury-wise, is having to stick to right now, has 2 10s behind the striker, which is not the same as a 4-3-3. It's almost a 4-3-3. 3-4-3. It's more of a 3-4-2-1. That's what it is, and those two are supposed to sit more like in a narrower role. It doesn't mean that you can't alter that and change it up and maybe go to more of a proper 3-4-3 with those players going out wider, and maybe the wing backs occasionally come in rather than always going around the outside. Because it was just fascinating what we saw with Sonny yesterday, because Sonny was brilliant. Honestly, in my ratings I gave him, I think, my joint highest mark, and some people kind of complained about it. But what I saw from Sonny was not only a remarkable goal, which we'll speak about in a moment, but also a terrific pre-assist to Højbjerg. But also on top of that, the work rate he put in was phenomenal. He worked so hard. whether it was on the left or the right, getting back in the pitch and covering and doing everything that's asked of him when the team needed to be compact. Again, from our press box seat, you do get to see a lot more of the game than maybe just what they show on telly. And his energy and work rate was superb. But that goal. If you wanted to say to someone, show me a clip of a trademark Sonny goal, it was that. And the fact that it was his 100th Premier League goal was absolutely beautiful. The execution was... It's one of those we've seen him do so many times where he has the ball out wide and he just cuts inside and just curls his foot around the ball in such a way that it bends away from the defender and goalkeeper and at the last second swerves inside. And this one, I could watch it over and over again. Just swerves inside the right-hand post into that little kind of area of side netting, the inside of the side netting. It's so good. So good. Teed up by Perisic. A Perisic assist for Sonny. Although obviously Sonny did all the hard work. Let's be honest. It wasn't like he did just square it to him. But still, that's progress. It was just beautiful and wild celebrations. 10 minutes in from the team and Christian Romero. When we're talking about trademarks, a bit of a Romero trademark celebration. He seemed to go up to, from what I saw, and it looked like it in the video as well, kind of goes up to Lewis Dunk, goes, "Hey," kind of thing. He loves to taunt the opposition. I don't know if it's an Argentinian thing, I don't know, but my goodness. He seemed to do that, and then he turned towards, I think it was Jason Steele in goal, and then he, but then obviously he could just say, I was doing it to Spurs fans behind the ball. But yeah, you watch it back, he could have easily turned away and run off with Sonny, but he is giving it to that defence. We've seen him do that a lot of times. I think most famously, was it Maguire own goal at Old Trafford? I think. Yeah. Obviously, Dunk would end up getting his own back when bizarrely, as the biggest man on the pitch, Spurs decided not to assign anyone to mark him. At first, we thought, he's lost his marker, and we watched it back in the press box, and it's like, oh my goodness, they haven't actually assigned a marker to him at any point. I don't think Spurs do zonal marking. It was just an absolute mess. And then later in the game, I saw Skippy trying to mark him. It was very strange. Gets up, heads the ball across the goal. Bit of a clumsy moment from Lloris, who seems to run out without looking into a cluster of players, which he then knocks back, staggers back over his own goal line. So even if he got the ball probably would have been behind the goal anyway, behind the line. Wasn't great for Lloris. Wasn't great for the defence. But yeah. Let's go back to that 10th minute. That moment of magic from Sonny, because it's so special. Because not only is he entered the 100 club, the Premier League's 100 goal club, but he's also, a real landmark of being the first Asian player to achieve this. It's wonderful. It's absolutely lovely that he is the figurehead of that, the landmark person to achieve that. And he was asked about it in his club interview after the game. He said, that is incredible. That makes me really, really happy. I think it's a big responsibility. All the Asian players, especially the South Korean players, they can believe that they can also achieve the big things if they work hard. If they keep working, they keep dreaming, I hope they can also achieve the big things. For me, it's very special. Always to be first is something special. It was a big, big achievement for me, but I still want to keep scoring a lot of goals for the people and for me, and to make people happy and make them believe they can do something also. I think hopefully, like I say, Everton aside, I think we're starting to see a bit of a ramp up again in his end product. That's 3 goal involvements in past 4 matches, 2 goals, 1 assist. So fingers crossed. We're starting to see, a bit more of the old Sonny coming through. Like I say, his part in Kane's goal as well was beautiful. It was a lovely moment, a nutmeg pass as well. And it was interesting, in his club interview, he was also asked about the goal, because obviously that is clearly a goal that we keep seeing him score, the cut in and shoot. And I would say he came as close as I've ever heard him before, without actually saying it, to suggesting that sometimes the tactics don't put him in that best position to score enough as maybe they should. Again, I don't want to be putting words into his mouth, so I'll say his words so you know exactly what he said. He said, I try to always be in this position, but sometimes it's difficult because they don't want me to shoot in this position. I think he means the opposition here. Judge it for yourself. I think he means the opposition don't want me to shoot in this position. Because then he says, but it's also that we're sometimes crossing the ball more, so I have to be in the box, so I can leave the wing-backs in a 1-versus-1 situation. It's all about different situations, and I have to read the game better. If I'm in this position, I'm really, really confident about scoring those goals. Look at last season, you can see how many goals I scored in this position. If I have these chances, I can score more goals. It was a very special goal because scoring 100 goals in this position where I love to shoot is just incredible. It's a really special moment. And he's not wrong. You know, if you're going to score that many goals from those positions where you drift inside from the flanks, then it is odd for any Spurs tactic to remove that option for him, or at least make it less likely for him to be in that position. And I absolutely agree. Again, I could be putting words in his mouth there rather than what he actually said. So, yeah, judge it for yourself in those quotes. They're also in my talking points if you want to look at them as well on my Twitter feed. Yeah, I guess for the sake of balance, you could also argue that he had his best ever season last season, scoring goal after goal like that in a wing-back formation system, in Conte's wing-back system then. So, obviously different person there now in Perisic, and we're not going to go into all of that again. We know that, that partnership hasn't quite gelled as much as we'd want it to be, although, again, it got an assist for him, so maybe that's the beginning of something. But yeah, definitely the system last season, he was absolutely fine with wing-backs and still was able to cut in. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to know kind of tactically from the coaches. Maybe, so I don't know if we'll ever get it because they might not be around to have a proper sit down and chat about it. Maybe, hey, who knows? Maybe on Thursday it's a question I can ask Delaney about Son saying that he's not in a position as much now to do that. Actually, can someone remind me ahead of Thursday's press conference? It actually could be a good point to, because Son has said this, it could be quite interesting now to hear whether Stellini agrees that he's not put in those positions as much. Yeah, that's it. See, figured out a press conference question. Remind me, please, people do. Hopefully now I'll get a load of tweets on Thursday ahead of the afternoon's press conference reminding me that was what I wanted to ask. The other thing I should also state, of course, Sonny still hasn't played to the level that he would have wanted to play at this season, regardless of any reasons behind it. And it was quite interesting. There was a little Sky interview beforehand where he and Eric Dyer answered various questions in a bowl. And one of them, well, it was kind of turned into a Conte question. It wasn't originally, because this is the key as well. I think is, like I say, Son is the first to very much be clear and say that he admits he's struggled this season and that he kind of needs to adapt to any changing tactics to make himself more unpredictable. Because I think that's the beauty of his game has always been he can come from the right, he can come from the left, he's both foot, he can do anything. So, yeah, I guess you've got to constantly adapt, I suppose. Sometimes it's difficult, but I understand that. So ahead of the game, he had this interview and he was asked, what would he tell Antonio Conte if he had a phone call with him right now? And his answer, look, Sonny is always classy. He's very humble in the way he approaches stuff and deals with it. But it also, I think, did give another insight into how disappointed he's felt with his own performances. He said, first of all, I'd say all the best, which is such an English expression. I love that you said that. And secondly, I feel sorry for what happened. I take a big responsibility because the expectation of me is to do much, much better than I have done. And he looked genuinely so sad. And Eric Dyer sat next to him, was very quickly came in and said, no, you're wrong. It's the team's responsibility for what's happened, not all on your shoulders at all. So it was lovely, to see him going in the dressing room after the game. We kind of saw the images, and Stellini told me about it when I asked about Sonny afterwards. You could see Sonny goes in the changing room. Every player kind of gives him this high five, and he's like a hero's reception. It's lovely. And then he goes over. He and Stellini shared a really nice moment where Stellini gives him this really long hug, and whatever Stellini is saying in his ear throughout, Sonny is like really smiling. He's got a really big beaming smile on his face. It's very nice. And then Stellini does this little kind of dressing room speech, and he actually told me, because I asked, my question about Sonny was essentially, another incredible achievement for him. He's in the 100 club now in the Premier League, and just especially because he's had a really difficult time. He's lost his grandfather in recent weeks. Very, very tough time recently for him. Yet he's just such a, how do I put this? I guess just such a trooper, someone that just carries on regardless and thinks about the team and he had this moment. So I asked Stellini, with all of that in mind, just how fantastic a moment was this? And he said, yeah, we celebrated in the dressing room. What I said was, this week we celebrated 70 years of Gianni Vio. We celebrated a new birth in Ryan Mason's family. He has a new son. And this type of human thing you have to celebrate every time. So we had 100 goals from Sonny. It's amazing to have this. It's normal that in football that when you win this type of match, there are individual targets, but that target can create energy if our best players play for the team and the win. Playing for the team. It's like a real obsessive thing with the Conte mindset, the Stellini mindset. And actually, to be fair, of course, all managers want that as well. But yeah, interesting that Ryan Mason. I knew Ryan Mason's wife was set to have a child at some point around this. I think it was in midweek it actually happened. I did wonder, because we didn't know that until after the game. But you could see that, we were wondering with Stellini, if he did get a ban, what if Ryan Mason suddenly, his wife suddenly goes into labour and he needs to be there? It's like, oh no, who's going to make, does Sonny or Harry Kane become player manager for the day? Or, who's the next in line? I don't even know who would be the next in line. Because the others are mainly fitness coaches and goalkeeping coaches. I don't know how that would work. I don't know. I'd put myself up. Can I go down and do it? Who knows? Maybe Daniel Levy would do it. That would go down well. Some people might suggest he interferes enough. But yeah, so brilliant moment for Sonny. Well deserved. Lovely to see. He looked like his confidence had returned as well. So that's great. And fingers crossed, they kind of ensure that the tactics from now on get the best out of him and Kane again, because they're your two best players. Make sure everything revolves around them and gives them the best chance to do the best things they can do. Because Kane, his another goal for him. That was I looked at the stats. I added it up. That was his 76th game-winning goal for Spurs in all competitions. That's just madness. 76 times he's come to the rescue for Spurs with the last kind of defining goal of a game. It's incredible. Just shows how crucial he's been. And that put him on 206 Premier League goals now. So he's only 2 behind Wayne Rooney in second place in the all-time top scorers list. It's now down to Stellini and Spurs, really, to make sure that the two of them continue. Because they just have that ability, both players, to turn on that little bit of magic that gets Spurs and their sometimes dreary, rigid tactics out of a hole. Sometimes you have to rely on the individual magic from these kind of world-class players, and that's what they do. And you've did it on Saturday, and now at least 8 more times, please, by the end of the season. So, the fans. Got to talk about the fans, because they had a big part to play in differing ways yesterday. It was fascinating to see the whole atmosphere and everything. Mainly, there was one moment for me that was like, whoa, that's really interesting. I know Daniel Levy's been away. I don't know whether he was back. There was some indication that he was going to be back for this match. But there was a moment just in the aftermath of Stellini going off when just this kind of noise started to come from the South Stand. This chant started to form. And we're in the press box. We were a bit like, what was... And we suddenly realised it was the Mauricio Pochettino, He's Magic, So it started in the South Stand, and it just started to filter in pockets around us in the other stands. I'm not going to say it was everyone, because there's always people when you say that go, I wasn't singing it. But I would say it got to a stage where it was loud. It was clearly thousands of people singing his song. I just thought that was, and actually straight after that, you got a little bit shorter, but you did get it. You could hear it. We want Levy out as well. So just in that moment, And actually, it was twice they sang for Pochettino in the game. We've heard it at away games. I'd say this is the first time in a home game I've really heard it sounding around the stadium. And that was a big moment, and kind of almost as if to say, we need him. He's the man. We need him right there as well. And it's a massive indicator of what's going on at the club right now. I find the Pochettino stuff fascinating because if you look on social media, you will find that there's probably a bit of a split, probably slightly more that would like Poch back, but there's quite a split into feelings towards him returning. However, I think this was another indication. I always like to judge things on the away support because for me, they're the ones that are there every week in, week out, going to every single game. So, I know some people don't have the means or the ability to go to every game, but obviously I think with the away fans, they are the ones who are there through thick and thin and, spend ridiculous amounts of money to do it. And every match, pretty much, there's been times where almost the entire away support has been singing for Pochettino. And then to hear it in the stadium as well with so many people, I mean, if I'm to guess at how many were singing it, maybe half the stadium. I don't know. But yeah, it just feels like the mood maybe among the casual or the fans out there in the street and in the stadium is probably more so, although I know I've just said half, but is more so leaning towards Pochettino return being a good thing than maybe it appears to be on social media. And look, I know this isn't representative at all, but whenever I'm stopped, I always have very nice chats with people that recognise my stupid face from these sort of things. Pretty much 99% of the interactions I've had in recent weeks, people have often started it with, is Poch coming back? When is Poch coming back? And honestly, there is this kind of a real push for him. And yeah, people always asking why won't Levy bring him back? And yeah, it's mad because when you think about it with outsiders looking at Spurs right now, yes, if they've watched this match, they'll have seen a very unconvincing performance, yet an important 3 points. But they will look at the Spurs at the table and see a team that are now just 3 points off third place. It's just, and there's a 6 points gap behind them as well to anyone else, like from fifth downwards, people in sixth downwards. I think it's Aston Villa. I think Aston Villa have been on a proper run. I think they're now up in sixth. And like anyone outside the club, fans from other clubs, they're probably looking at it and thinking, why's your manager just gone? Kind of thing. And why are the fans so frustrated that they're singing for a former manager during a game? And I get that. It is from the outside, it probably looks really weird. It looks like, well, are you meant to be up there almost in third place? Are you expected to be title challengers or something? But the truth is, it's so much more different from the inside. And when you're a Tottenham fan, it's a very different feeling. And, I said this before, but the supporters are at a point now where many are either so bored of Spurs, they're either just apathetic to them entirely, or some are very angry about what's happening at Spurs. To a point where, it was announced in the week, wasn't it, that the season ticket prices were being frozen. I think, any thoughts the club had, and there were definitely thoughts that those prices were being put up, it would have been absolute madness to do so in the current atmosphere and feeling towards the club and the owners. So, yeah, it kind of, not everything from the outside is visible, I think is probably the best way to put it as well. Because, especially with the season tickets, there's little point in having one of the best stadiums in the world if over the past 4 years, fans have just had to watch mostly counter-attacking football there, and a team that often plays, again yesterday, like the away team. I'm sorry, but why would you pay huge prices to watch football? I won't lie. There's some of us journalists. We were looking at the way Zerbi's team played yesterday, and we were saying to each other, can you imagine reporting on that kind of football week in, week out? It's true. It would be so wonderful. And there's no reason why Spurs... I've always went all funny there because I'm so annoyed. There's no reason why Spurs could not have brought that kind of football to the club. You know, they had it. Those peak years of Poch, the football was glorious. We saw them dismantling teams so many times. But yet, ever since then, the decision has just been a very different kind of coach. Very much, especially with Conte and Mourinho, drawn to people that have won stuff elsewhere, regardless of sometimes how the football is going to appear. And yeah, honestly, I 100% understand why the fans are so frustrated. I really do. Yeah, I mean, look, Zerbi did not enamour himself to the Spurs fans, especially those ones behind the Brighton dugout. They were, how do I say this? They were doing various hand gestures towards him after his red card. It did not go, it was taken. They were happy to see him go. It's probably the best way to put it. And yeah, despite all of that, though, he was delivering a style of football exactly that was promised by Daniel Levy, and a promise that he has not kept. There's no getting around it. It's an unkept promise. And, had VAR actually been of any real use to anybody yesterday, then, yeah, Brighton would have walked away from that game with 3 points, and it would have been the perfect demonstration of exactly why that kind of football wins as well. Can you imagine that kind of football with Harry Kane at the top of it and Sonny at the top of it? Just be incredible. And look, talking about Kane, even he was impressed by the way that Brighton have been playing. These were his quotes afterwards in his club interview. We were playing against a really good team. They're built well. They play a really good style of football. At times we knew they were going to have possession, but we had to defend well, defend crosses, and then we created our chances as well. We had 2 or 3 in the first half and 2 or 3 in the second. In these games in the Premier League, you just have to find a way to grind it out. And I'm really delighted after last week and being disappointed after that result. And now we can look forward to another home game next Saturday. And this is the problem. Spurs fans and Kane have just had to watch their team hope to grind out a win so many times in recent years, rather than just dare to actually triumph in style, like really go for it. And just too many times you see them there just kind of waiting to catch teams on the break rather than take the game to them, like a coiled up snake waiting to kind of woof and pounce, rather than just being aggressive from the outset. And we were talking about this, a couple of journalists afterwards, that with Pochettino's team, they did sometimes play counter-attacking football, but it was a tactic. It was a secondary tactic to try to draw out sometimes more compact teams. It wasn't an everyday plan A tactic. On the whole, Spurs tried to keep the ball, use their high pressing style, win it back high up the pitch and everything. Whereas, it just in the last 4 years or so has become the plan A rather than the plan B or C. And that's been the biggest thing that I think it's been difficult to watch, really. Let's be honest. And the fact that we had these loud Pochettino chants, which the players would have heard as well. Of course they would have. They were there on the pitch. It was just another loud suggestion that Levy got it wrong in 2019 with sacking rather than backing Pochettino. And I kind of looked up, because I always stuck in my head what Levy said in the Amazon All or Nothing series way back when, 2019-20 season, when he was asked about the decision to sack Pochettino. This is what he said, if you've forgotten. A lot of heartache is the honest answer. It's never easy when you have to ask someone to leave the club. When you've been working with someone for 5.5 years, it's difficult. My heart was telling me, don't do it. And my brain was telling me, you need to do it. It's the most emotional decision I've ever had to make. It was more than just employer-employee relationship. We went away together. We had a lot of fun times outside the club. I'm sure after a little while we'll continue doing that. At the moment, things are a little raw, which is understandable. Mixed emotions. It's not a nice experience for either of us. Everyone is going to have different opinions. The fact is that the results weren't where they needed to be. We have to do what we feel is right for the club, and only time will tell if it's the right decision. Time has not told it's the right decision whatsoever. I'm afraid it just hasn't. No, you could argue that had the managers brought in afterwards been given even more of a backing, yeah, perhaps they could have been successful. But I still don't think you can say that time has proved at all that it was the right decision in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, not at all. It's just madness, as I said before. Not one. There will be four. The next person that walks through the door will make it 4 managers in 4 years since Poch went. Not a single one of those managers that came after him lasted a full season at Tottenham Hotspur, which is ridiculous. And as I've said before as well, Spurs have got no real identity on or off the pitch anymore. Well, not a good one anyway, that identity. And those disgruntled voices with Daniel Levy, ENIC, the club's decisions, they're just growing and growing and growing. They really are. There was a little protest outside the ground. That it wasn't. I don't think it had really set up when I got there, but a couple of other journalists, because I was there at 12, so I don't think it really happened. But a couple of journalists that turned up about an hour or two later. They did little videos of it, so I did see what was going on. Say there was about, I hope I'm not doing a disservice, 30, 40 people involved, I think. Yeah, so there was a little protest outside with the banners, but maybe more kind of attention will be drawn to the fact that obviously you might have seen it. There's this online petition that's going around to remove Daniel Levy from his role, which I think the last time I looked had over 13,000 signatures. So that's a big thing. That's a big signal of discontent, as will the chants in the stadium as well, of course, which will be seen on screens and everything around the world. So yeah, there's a lot of disgruntled voices, and I found it very interesting this week that I should also state I'm not having a go at any way that the numbers in the protest. It's very difficult, isn't it? The difference between, how do I put this? The difference between the ease, I guess, of signing a petition and a concerted effort to go and join in a protest are two different things. And I'm not talking about Spurs, I'm talking about everything in life. You know, the people that get involved in protests and the people that will sign something online. It's a different thing. But then, like I say, you know, the chance, the Levy out chance, there would have been, I guess if we're saying the Poch ones, I wouldn't say they were as loud as the Poch ones, but they were definitely, you could argue there must have been 1,000, maybe thousands singing that. So definitely, you know, there was a voice to that, a loud voice to that, and I think that very much has to be accepted and understood. But yeah, I did find it really interesting this week. Spurs, in case you missed it, appointed a new person, and it did seem to be another indication that Levy will be stepping back from football related decisions. It was the appointment of Scott Munn in a newly created role called Chief Football Officer. So I understand he's set to begin work this summer. He hasn't actually started yet, and he will essentially become Levy's number 2. Which makes me always think of Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and his number 2, which was oh my goodness, what was his name? Robert. Completely gone out of my head. The guy was in Heart to Heart many years ago. Those for the older viewers there. Very good actor. But yes, so Munn's come in, Scott Munn. And the club confirmed that he will join the board and take charge of all football departments. So, in essence, that would appear on paper to be Levy stepping back. So, a little bit of history about Munn, he was CEO of Melbourne City FC before the City Group kind of took over all of that, and he was put in charge of their entire China division and what they did over there in that market. This will be his first position in European football. It's obviously going to be very different tasks to what he's had before. But the expectation is that he will bring a lot of that knowledge of the inner workings of the City Group, which obviously is a massive, sprawling thing now with various clubs. And who knows, maybe eventually that multi-club idea will be brought into Spurs. I don't know, maybe you'll have different hot Spurs in different countries. That's just me speculating. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. That would be very weird, wouldn't it, to have like a I don't know, a Chinese team or a team in America or something with Hotspur at the end. Who knows? Could that be the future? Would you want to see it? It'd be interesting to tell me in the comments. Would that be, would that be absolutely awful to see? You know, in a world where there's many cities and United, there's only one Tottenham Hotspur, isn't there? It was always the expression. Would it be, what's the word? Is it sacrosanct? I can't remember the word I'm looking for. But, you know, would it be against everything you believe in to see more Hotspurs out in the world? You know? It's an interesting thing. Obviously, it does create a very powerful group and unit. But does it just stop Spurs just being a football club? You know, there's loads of sides. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I just wondered whether that's an element that they would look to bring, or future owners perhaps would look to bring. But yeah, of course, as recent managers have found at Spurs, he will find a very different club to the one he was used to in City and their group. The hope, obviously, amongst the fan base will now be that maybe he will have more power to change things inside Tottenham, because this is a position that's loftier than any before him. I mean, even Fabio Paratici will, if he returns after this appeal and future investigations or current investigations that are going on, he will report into Mun as well. Yeah, it's a difficult one, because some people quite rightly may say, well, you know, once again, you know, we said all this about Paratici. He was coming in a big role near the top, and you know, has he been able to really change things? I do think he's made quite a few changes. I've said it before in previous video about the amount of stuff he's done behind the scenes, rightly or wrongly. So I do think he's had far more of a say. But the idea is that this Scott Munn will have a very big remit, a very high up one. And like I say, will essentially be Levy's number 2, and everything football related will come to him. You know, will Levy still have the final say on stuff? We'll probably quite swiftly find out. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. And also, if Paratici does end up not returning, do they bring in another, like a director of football type in that role? Because I don't know, would you need Paratici's role as someone on the board, as a managing director of football? Or would you just need to go back to a straight sporting director of football role, which was kind of a bit lower than that position, because you've got Munn on the actual board itself? If it's decided they don't need that, because you would think you need someone, with Scott Munn having the lack of experience when it comes to European football, you would think that, you know, you'd need someone in that in-betweeny role to kind of guide him. Who knows? Maybe they don't decide to do that, and people like Greta Steinson, who's the performance director, and Andy Scolding, the head of football strategy, maybe they get promoted, and that kind of fills that gap in the middle, and they work as like a trio almost, maybe. And you've got Simon Davies below that, the head of coaching methodology throughout the club as well. I know these titles sound ridiculous, but that's what they were given. Spurs have created a lot of new titles in recent years. It's almost like get someone just kind of in a room whose job it is purely to create new titles. So yeah, we'll see exactly where that goes, and obviously hoping to, well, the plan is that I'm going to be out there on the summer tour, and obviously that starts off in Perth. As an Australian, Scott Munn, I'm hoping he'll be out there. Maybe we'll get that first interview with him and really get more of a sense of what he's going to bring to the club, and yeah, everything that he kind of needs to learn about the Premier League. And although interesting, I do think he played a role in bringing aspects of the Premier League out to China. I did read a little piece with him about how they were bringing the Premier League trophy out there and the matches out there. So he will have had some dealings with the Premier League. It'll be interesting to see. I think this is the key for a lot of people, is how much power does he wrestle away from Daniel Levy? Can Daniel Levy ever really kind of allow that much power be taken away from him? But actually, talking to Steinson, there was an interesting little thing anyone on social media might have noticed. There was a little bit of a to-do buzz, a kerfuffle. That sounded like the Little Britain characters. What a kerfuffle. Jesus Perez, obviously you'll be well aware, as Mauricio Pochettino's long-time assistant manager, put up a tweet and an Instagram post. Although the Instagram post wasn't very clear, the Twitter photo was very clear of just his laptop in the sunshine, working away using some kind of performance analysis software. But what those eagle-eyed Twitter users noticed that on his laptop you could see various tabs that were behind the other tabs or alongside the other tabs. And you could see that one very clearly showed a Sami Mokbel article. Sami, very good journalist who works for the Daily Mail. One of his articles that was talking about essentially why would any manager want to join Spurs now and how everything had become the Daniel Levy show. So quite fascinating that Perez was reading that. But also there was another tab that appeared to say Greta Steinson at the top. So, yeah, I mean, read into that what you will. It could mean something. It could mean nothing at all. It could be Perez being a little bit mischievous or just a bit forgetful and not realising that he had these tabs open. It could mean anything. But what it did show that the Spurs are clearly on his mind. He's still reading about his old club and certainly researching some of the characters and people that are there. Yeah. Whether Pochettino, of course, is in Daniel Levy's mind is another thing. I know the Spurs fans, certainly on Saturday, were doing as much as they could to put him back in there. Because, however many people Daniel Levy appoints around him, some more cynical types might suggest he's forming a shield around him to deflect criticism. That's not going to work because all eyes are just still on him. And I guess what he's about to decide, because this will be, I said this before, but it'll be his 13th manager in 2 decades at Tottenham Hotspur, permanent manager. He needs to bring in someone who can piece together what is a properly fractured club, whether that's the players and the fans, whether that's the management, the coaching staff and the fans, whether that's the first team and the academy, whether that's just everyone around the club. Someone needs to come in and unify everything. I mean, let's be honest, that should be his job as the big boss man at the top of it all. And maybe that's what Scott Munn will come in and be asked to do as well. I certainly read some quite positive stuff about him, what he was doing, obviously, on a smaller scale at Melbourne City. Very much seemed to be that he was very involved with the fans and quite engaged in the community as well. So if you can bring that to Spurs, I think that will go a long way to helping things. Again, I've said it a million times that we need to have a more public face. We need to have someone that will talk. I think the idea was for Pratic to be that, and it never happened. So maybe Scott Munn now becomes the more acceptable, vocal face. Can you have a vocal face? I guess you can, of Tottenham Hotspur, because Daniel Levy clearly isn't ever going to be that. There needs to be someone that Scott Munn has put a lot of pressure on him, but also the new manager, whenever they do arrive, please sooner rather than later, they need to help Spurs fans fall in love with their club again, because that's the biggest thing for me right now. It's you could feel it around the ground, as well as the chants, obviously, that I've spoken about, Levy out for Pochettino. Which, be honest, let's be absolutely honest, although I understand where it's coming from, chanting for Pochettino in front of the current coaching staff is not great. And there were definitely times where it was being chanted while Conte was there as well. I heard that. So, it's not the most ideal atmosphere, because, also you had groans and jeers throughout Saturday's game, mostly for the decision to keep going with these short goal kicks. And when finally Lloris hit a long one, there was this massive kind of ironic cheer to that as well. Similar with Danjuma. When Danjuma came on, it was a big kind of, yay, like, you're rubbish, you rubbish coaches. Thank you for finally giving us the player we want to see come on. I saw a really interesting, someone tweeted in reply to something I put out earlier, saying that they should do an app where before a game, the fans get to pick the tactics for the match, and in-game they get to pick the substitutions. And I love the thinking behind it. I love the kind of ingenuity of thinking of that. But come on. Not only does it negate all of these very qualified people and what they're doing, but can you imagine if even journalists, let alone fans, were able to decide the tactics and substitutions again? The team would be awful. It would be awful. We have so many differing opinions as fans and journalists. And we don't have the knowledge and level of understanding of tactical systems and everything, of course. It would be horrendous, but I love the idea. I love the enthusiasm behind the idea. So that just kind of made me think about it, because of a lot of the noises I was hearing at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And, I should stress, I absolutely 100% understand the Spurs fans' frustrations. 100%. They're entirely understandable, because, this is a period that just seems to be ever lengthening, when they don't feel that their best interests are at heart of the decisions that are made at the club. And I absolutely understand that. I think that's clear to see that they don't feel valued, the fans, despite all the platitudes that Spurs will often put out in various statements of how important the fans are and everything. Look, some of the decisions taken clearly don't appear to have that their best interests at heart. It doesn't. I know it's always made out that Spurs are custodians of this club, and ENIC are, and Daniel Levy, and certainly financially, yes, you could argue that it's got a safe place for long term, but sometimes the decisions taken are not what the fans want or often need. Again, it's just this lack of. It just winds me up so much. The lack of understanding between the club's owners and the fans, and no real knowledge of how they feel and why they feel what they feel. That's always been the strangest thing. It's I don't know if there's. Obviously, we've seen protests at other clubs, so it's probably not fair to say I've never seen a disconnect like this in other clubs, because we have. But definitely, that is one of the most glaring things, is the disconnects between what the owners of the club believe is right for the club and what the fans want for the club. And I'm not talking about extreme views where people want like £1 billion put into the club or this and that. I'm talking about more the people that just, like I say, just want to have a club that they're proud of again. And they're the people you kind of want to listen to, more than the shouty voices at both extremes. It's more the people in the middle that are getting kind of the ones, maybe the voices to listen to. I don't know. But yeah, like I say, but the knock-on effect is obviously the atmosphere does create its own part in the drama, whether it is negatively or positively. And I know Conte kind of referred to it, and maybe he wasn't the best person to say it at that point. But, you do see it. You see when the crowd feel anxious and the kind of like jeers and negative stuff, and you see the players become scared of making mistakes. But it also works exactly the other way. Like when Danjuma came on, there was this real buzz and anticipation, and everything he did was being cheered. And the team responded, and within a minute, Spurs scored. So you can kind of see how it's such a vicious circle, because the players and the club have an immediate impact on how the fans feel and react. And how the fans feel and react has an impact on the players. It's such this weird, vicious circle. Maybe the idea is, or maybe it's more a trickle down than a circle. Maybe that if what they did at the top was right, the fans would be happy, and that would impact the players. And maybe that's what we saw with, especially the last year at White Hart Lane. The fans were in such a good place. So, well, quite literally, they were in White Hart Lane, but they were in such a good space as well. And mentally, they were so behind the team, and there was never a closer connection between the team and the fans. And almost the fans were like, the cliche, it's the 12th man, were pushing the team through everything. And it was honestly, without doubt, one of the most enjoyable kind of times I've ever had in my career was covering Spurs right then. And it was all wrapped up in one. They were pushing the team on just as much. And now we're in this scenario where, everything is affecting everyone. And it's not good. I don't want to use the word toxic, but that's kind of what it could become quite easily, couldn't it? I did worry about that. If Spurs lost yesterday or were losing yesterday, what atmosphere would have been like in that stadium. And Stellini said afterwards, it's important sometimes that something like this, as in his red card, happens to switch on the head of the players and also the crowd. It was amazing the effort the crowd put in that moment. They felt the team needed energy and they gave us energy. We are happy when we have the crowd with us, and I think this is a positive. Although I would say that immediate energy after the red card was more calls for Pochettino and Levy out, but I get what he meant. After that, they then very much focused, I think, on trying to push the team, especially with the Dan Juma substitution. I'd say was the one that changed it. Ooh, a positive substitution actually made a difference to everyone. Maybe we should have seen more of those this season, but there you go. So yeah, 8 games left till I was going to say we'll get a break and I put a break and a rest together and described a piece of the anatomy, the body's anatomy. That was a strange one, but anyway, you can see it was a long night writing about Spurs. I was writing about it until 4 a.m. in the morning, which took far too long over my talking points. But thankfully, a lot of people are reading them, so that's fine. Oh, the ice cream van just went by, but it didn't have its music on, which means it's probably going to do it in a minute. The creepy noise from it. 8 games left until we get a break or a rest, not a breast. You may get a breast. Oh, I can hear the ice cream van. You probably can't hear it, it's too quiet. And we find out, I guess, these 8 games will pretty much define what foundations, I guess, the new manager has when he comes in, what he has to build on. Much like Zerbi had Potter's foundations, or despite the fact that he now seems to be annoyed at that, the new manager will have whatever Stellini and before him Conte have built for him to then create upon and hopefully take Spurs in a bit of a different direction, a more enjoyable, attractive destination would be nice. But just for now, these 8 games, Stellini, the players, hopefully with Kane and Son firing again, and eventually Levy with whatever decision he makes. They just need to give the fans a reason to believe in Tottenham Hotspur again, not only for now, but for the foreseeable future. We shall see. We shall see. Right, no, ice cream van's flown by. It's not going to sell any ice creams going at that speed. It's an old Morecambe and Wise joke there about the ambulance. It's showing how old I am there. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Apparently there's a report regarding the Euro 2028 bid and naming rights for the Spurs Stadium not being in place. It means the Spurs won't be considered. But it sounds like everything come out of Spurs is saying that's not true. Don't know. There's literally a passing message right at the end of this. I must admit I hadn't seen the original report anyway. So there you go. Right, time to head off. Go and enjoy the sunshine. Take my mind off Spurs if they'll allow me. Something will probably break. There's a couple of good games to watch as well today. Sonny has just been voted man of the match as well for yesterday's game, which is fully deserved. Yeah. Unless something major breaks in the week, probably won't do another video until next weekend after the Bournemouth game. That, interestingly, Spurs now won their last 5 home Premier League games. If they could do it against Bournemouth, who, yes, they've been putting in some very good performances, but yet again, they are a team down in the lower end of the table. Spurs should really be looking to win that game. Make it 6 wins at home in a row, and suddenly you set yourself up for a big week that includes Newcastle away, which I'll be heading off to, Man United at home, and then the trip to Anfield. So, huge week that, and you want to go into it with the best possible momentum that you can have in the team and everything. So, probably find out a little bit more of Stellini and the coaching staff and what happens with them with the FA and who gets charged and who doesn't. But yeah, unless something major happens, I might not do a midweek one unless there's cause for some kind of Q&A. We'll see. We'll see how the week progresses. But yeah, time to head off. Time to enjoy the sunshine. Hopefully you can all do the same. Happy Easter to those who celebrate Easter and all it entails. I like the chocolate eggs. I got a couple this morning, which I'm very much looking forward to eating over the course of, I'd love to say the coming days, but I would also love to eat them by the end of today. So yeah, I'm going to head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.